Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. We'll start in just a couple of minutes. We are expecting a few more attendees to join in. Thank you. All right, let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, depending on where you're connecting from. Welcome to yet another exciting Citrix Ready technical webinar where we showcase how Citrix and our partners like TruU here with us today integrate to deliver valuable products to our mutual customers. I'm Anil Kumar, your host for today. I'm a technical marketing manager at Citrix Ready. And we have Horatio and Jason from TruU with us. Horatio, would you like to introduce a little bit about yourself? And yeah, I just unmuted you. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Anil. It's a pleasure to be here with Citrix and yourself to talk about our partnership and integration. TruU is an enterprise identity vendor, and we're really pushing the boundary in passwordless and badgeless access for employees. And I run marketing and strategy, and I'll let Jason briefly introduce himself as well.
Yep. Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Chow. I'm a product manager at TruU, working to help build passwordless solutions to partners like Citrix and beyond. Looking forward to talking to everyone today.
Perfect. Very, very excited to have both of you here with us today. Thank you. And this is something which we've introduced. I think this is the first webinar where we are having some giveaways to attendees. So so as you can see on the screen, every 10th webinar attendee gets those really cool earbuds. And only for the US attendees for now. So by the end of the webinar, you'll receive an email from our team, probably after the webinar. All you have to do is fill out that form and send it back to us, and we'll get that delivered to you. All right, so before we move on, just wanted to talk very briefly about what Citrix Ready is. It's a technology partner program where we identify recommended solutions that are trusted to enhance our digital workspace networking and app delivery services. So you could visit our marketplace at the below link, and all the products which are showcased there, including TruU, have been thoroughly validated for compatibility with our products, and it really helps customers who are making purchasing decisions. So that's the link to visit Citrix City Marketplace down there below. And passwordless is one of the new industry buzzword, and it's pretty strong around the security community. And to introduce and talk a little bit about that, I'll let Horatio take over.
Yeah, thanks, Anil. So this is a quote that you'll see from Gartner, who's been, I think, one of the evangelists for passwordless. That's often used by the vendors in the market. And it's a pretty aggressive quote. It says that in the next 2 years, they believe 60% of large enterprises are going to be implementing passwordless, and 90%, this was really surprising to me, and mid-sized enterprises would implement passwordless in 50% of the use cases. And I think what's in this session, we talk about secure and frictionless access to Citrix, and I think it's important to contextualize the passwordless stat here. We're going to talk about why is it that they have such aggressive numbers and what may be happening to get to that mainstream adoption if your organization is not already there. Also wanted to talk about why they believe that passwordless is appropriate for now. And there's 4 fundamental reasons. One is that, pretty much every other part of the tech stack has evolved in the last 40, 50 years. And the way we authenticate has not. But one thing that is true is that today we have in our possession, most knowledge workers, maybe 90% carry a smartphone with them. So there is smartphone ubiquity. We've also in authentication gone through a phase where in the early part of the decade, with the rise of cloud and SaaS applications, there was a single sign-on sort of wave, and that's now a mainstream technology. In the last 4 to 5 years, what we've seen more is 2-factor authentication and multi-factor authentication in the way we access, for example, applications. So the infrastructure is now at a point where we can do something different and begin to create new solutions for frictionless access. The second is that for sure security, the number one thing people are going after is the password. We know that from 60 to 80%, depending on what year, the data breach report from Verizon is indicating that passwords are the source of data breaches. And there's a lot of security issues there around phishing, credential harvesting. The whole dark web runs on selling passwords, but many billions and billions of dollars are being spent on this artifact. And the fact is that SMS and email have been proven to be, in some cases, very risky as a major way to validate a second factor. We also see a lot of companies wanting to change the way they authenticate because of the user angst, and that is that passwords are tough on users. They typically, people have 3 to 4, 5 passwords for anywhere from 50 to 150 systems that they have to access. So that means there's a lot of reuse, and often companies will rotate to complexity. And so that's another reason that we see companies wanting to move to something better. And then lastly, it's the cost. This cost, from the standpoint of password resets, we've seen everything from customers that spend 30% of their help desk calls to 50% of their help desk calls on password resets, spending in the millions of dollars actually per year on lost productivity and on helping end users. The other thing is that companies that have done a lot of acquisitions will often have multiple physical security systems, and they'll also have multiple IDPs and multiple directories in their very complex enterprise. And so there's a cost to that in terms of the people that need to maintain that. So that's something that we wanted to put out there to motivate this conversation, and what we see from the analyst and the reasons.
Right, that's very insightful, Horacio. Thanks for that. And like the webinar title has suggests, today we'll definitely see how TruU provides that completely frictionless or passwordless access to Citrix's workspace, and why do we encourage customers to choose Citrix as your workspace partner as for the following reasons, or what you see on the screen. So we are trusted around all the verticals. Almost all the top 10 companies across the verticals use Citrix. We are very strong and going with 400,000 plus customer organizations worldwide using our solutions. And the main couple of products which really a lot of our customers uses obviously are Citrix Workspace, powered by our virtual apps and desktops. So just a very brief overview about why Citrix Workspace is the best out there. So this is what's really required in a workspace technology stack, right? It should not really be point products from different vendors. Citrix Workspace provides everything which is required for a digital workspace to be available by us. So it includes everything which an employee requires to get all his work done in one place. And for admins, it's all unified and available in one place to manage everything. So this is how the workspace looks, right? So it has all your on-premises apps, your cloud-hosted applications, and SaaS apps, all your virtual desktops, which is hosted both on-premises and on public clouds, and including the Windows WVD, and all your documents, everything available in one place, so that user does not really have to do that context switching and get distracted, and productivity is something which is really get enhanced when you have everything available in one place to work. And we haven't stopped there. So we've added something called the intelligent experience to our digital workspace, and as you can see on the screen, we have an assistive search available, personalized feeds, recommended actions, and this is very cool, and a lot of our customers are really loving this, and we are working with a lot of software vendors out there to build these micro apps to basically display only feeds and actions which employees really require. So this is just a journey. We had the storefront, which used to look like this, with your hosted desktops and published apps presented in storefront. Then we moved on to workspace with some more features like single sign-on and two-factor authentication, and integrating our share file and other documentation into the workspace. And now we have all these really cool intelligent features added to it. Right. So only we provide that complete solution for a complete digital workspace. So now let's see how Citrix, being the digital workspace partner, and TruU providing that truly frictionless access to Citrix Workspace, really helps improve that productivity, and also get rid of all the hassles passwords include, like Horacio mentioned earlier. So over to you, Horacio.
Great, and I'm going to have Jason switch out the slides as we get ready to show you the technology. As I mentioned, we're what we would consider next generation enterprise identity, and what we've seen as we focus on large enterprises is the dominant position that Citrix has for virtual desktop infrastructure. And since we've been on this journey with the COVID fully remote work, we've seen an increased amount of requests for Citrix environments and being able to integrate into those. So we support a full set of Citrix solutions, particularly the virtual desktops and virtual apps, whether they're being accessed on-premise or remotely through a gateway, such as what formerly was known as the NetScaler gateway. We have very deep integration using Saml and OIDC. In the case of Citrix, we use the Saml integration that allows us to also work with the workspace and the storefront. I want to make sure that we get the slides up here.
Right. Right now I see just a blank screen.
Sure.
We're having a little technical difficulty.
It was present for a second, Jason. If you want to show it even in a slide like here, that's fine. Just leave it there.
Perfect.
Maybe center the screen. Yeah, we've gone back to there we go. Okay, we're on now.
Yeah.
So if I could get you to move forward here from here, Jason. Great. So we talked about the reasons for why Gartner feels the market should move to passwordless. Let's take a little just check on where we are as an industry. I think it's important because if you're looking at improving the access and frictionless ability to get into Citrix, you might want to consider what's really happening overall in the market. What we see is that as an industry, we've made some progress to enabling a passwordless environment. I have to give kudos to Microsoft and their sort of evangelization of passwordless, but for many companies, they don't really have a blueprint for how to go enterprise-wide with passwordless. So what you see is many of them may implement a Windows Hello for Business. They may be buying the latest hardware that has Touch ID, and that's sort of the extent of where they want to go. That improves the user experience, but the reality is you still have a password there, and the user still has to remember that. So you really haven't solved the security problem that we sought out to solve. Maybe you've gotten a better user experience for the hardware. To solve this problem, the other issue is that we see a patchwork of solutions. You really don't want to have what I would call the Swiss cheese problem, where you may allow passwordless for the workstation, but then when the person is trying to connect from home on a VPN or VDI, they still have to remember the password. It's actually more difficult because they're probably not using it often. And then you still have the help desk calls and all of the issues. So we do see this issue with disjointed systems in the market, and the fact that what's really needed is a cohesive strategy here. And then the last thing is there's been many security solutions that have been, the death knell has been that the user themselves will not use it if it's not a great user experience. And I'm talking about consumer level, like Apple level usability in an enterprise setting. We have this thing in the industry called Mfa Fatigue, which is that end users get tired of having to pull out even just a mobile phone to accept a notification, much less if they have to bring it up for a QR code scan or for a biometric every time. If you have to do this several times a day, it can get very tedious. And so we believe this has been a barrier that's held back broad scale enterprise adoption. And so when you look at that Gartner stat we started with, how do they estimate that 90% of the market or 60% of large enterprises will be there in 2 years? They're primarily talking about the first bucket here, that just by enabling a hardware biometric, you're already passwordless. But in our mind, there's a difference here. So if you go to the next slide, Jason, what we really think that we focused on and what we think really needs to happen as a holy grail is this idea of enterprise grade passwordless. And Jason, we're still seeing the old slide here. I think it's just coming in now. So this idea of enterprise grade passwordless is really taking it to the next level so that an enterprise can actually transform the way an end user experiences their workplace. It means being able to eliminate the password in the underlying directory. And that means that all the way down to the workstation, which is usually domain joined and requires that network, the network login from the password that's in the directory. We need to be able to solve that problem end to end. The second thing is it does have to have this broad scope coverage of the different use cases, because if you're only solving it in one place, but when you're at home or when you're trying to access from an unmanaged PC, you have to remember the password, then that's a problem as well. It really does need to be one unified cohesive solution across all of this. And the last thing is it does have to have something better than what the average, even passwordless solution in the market today has, which is primarily a mobile push to a biometric that may be on the phone. It has to be something next level to really break through the barriers that we see in mainstream adoption of passwordless for the enterprise. And so these are the three things we set out to solve. And I think that should be in the back of any buyer's mind when they're looking at enabling passwordless for any use case in particular, in this case, Citrix. So let's move forward here. What we see in the prospects and the customers that we talk to are these motivations for coming to us. One is that we've seen places where there was a breach and they've created new standards for passwords that are very complex, that have to be changed every 30 or 45 or 60 days. And there is end users dissatisfaction with that rigidity around authentication. We've seen customers that have just rolled out a traditional MFA solution, and the traditional MFA almost being two-factor, which means you have a password, but then you have like a mobile push or a push to an email, as a second factor. And that becomes painful for the end users as well. Again, that's been coined Mfa Fatigue. Then you have the option of adaptive MFA, which only the largest companies tend to be deploying, which says, okay, instead of always producing a password plus a second factor, in some situations, let's try to identify that it's the same user, it's the same device, so let's not do it on this particular time. So adaptive MFA tries to remove the second factor in every access decision. But what we see is that that's typically a rules-based decision, and we think there's a lot of room for innovation here using machine learning and anomaly detection around many more things than just a user, a device, or one location. And that's one of the things that we invest in heavily. Now, in both of those cases, the traditional MFA and adaptive MFA, we would not consider any of those to be what people call frictionless. You may see this marketed around the industry, but really we think we need to take it to a higher level. And then the last thing, of course, is we have had customers that have even told us they spend 40 to 50% of their help desk calls on password resets. In particular, when you use the Mac has some complexity around a local file vault and how that's integrated into the network, that we've seen some customers have very high percentage of password resets just on the Mac alone, and has been a driving force for our conversations. So with that in mind, I want to pass it over to Jason, who's going to give us more of the technology view and demonstration of this technology to give you a sense for what we're talking about here.
Great, and thank you, Horacio. Before I get into the details, what I'd like to do is start with 3 polled questions that I'd like to display, not just for everyone to read as a question, but also to see the answers of all the participants. So we're going to start with the first question. The question reads, is your organization using Windows Hello or Touch ID for biometric login to Windows or Macs? We'll give a few seconds for the question. Okay. We'll get ready to ask our next question. Okay. So the next question is we're curious, are you using Citrix on shared machines or kiosks, either as a primary use case within your organization or a part of your use cases within your overall Citrix deployment? Okay, great. 23% say yes, 69 no, 8% unsure, great. And let's get the last question in. This is a common one that we always see, and the question really is, especially as it comes to passwordless experiences, do you know if you're using IWA or Kerberos for passwordless access to Citrix? Wonderful. All right, so 4% yes, 71% no, 25% unsure. Thank you. So we asked these questions as a way to frame the Citrix solution that we had come up with. And maybe to frame how we approached this problem was, we really wanted to understand, what did Citrix customers mean when they want a frictionless or a passwordless login experience to Citrix? We really boiled that down to 3 sub-items. It was very important that from a workstation, from a corporate issued workstation that is either on or off the network, that login experience has to be passwordless. And that's not just to Citrix, but also to the workstation itself. It was also important from those shared computing devices, such as kiosks, that the access to Citrix was passwordless. And finally, it was important that access to Citrix from personal workstations, such as employees whom are accessing their Citrix resources at home, that be a passwordless experience as well. So very simple constraints. It comes down to the execution of details that we'll talk through in just a moment. On the Citrix side, it was also important for us to understand what mechanisms exist for authenticating the user into Citrix. And in talking with many different Citrix customers, what I saw predominantly in use was the use of LDAP plus optional MFA via radius. Nothing wrong with this option. It was an option that was heavily adopted, fairly consistent with experiences such as logging into a workstation or logging into other resources, but still fundamentally relies on that password. We then know that Citrix also supports smart cards. Smart cards being a pretty good solution when it comes to passwordless, but one of the challenges, if you go back to the use cases above, is smart cards work really well from corporate issued machines, but has a challenge specifically on personal workstations, i.e., it's very challenging for me to plug in my smart card to my personal Mac at home. So good consideration, but maybe not necessarily the best solution for the broader audience. Then finally, we look at the Saml approach. Now, Saml is interesting because many organizations have identity providers out there. They provide single sign-on access to a broad range of applications. The important part with Saml is that in generating the Saml assertion that is passed to Citrix, it's very important that that Saml assertion be generated without the use of a password. And in a nuanced case, some of the identity providers do solve this with the use of integrated Windows authentication or Kerberos. However, the question still remains, how did that Kerberos ticket get generated in the first place? Typically, it's generated from a password that was entered at the workstation level. And from the workstation, it is a passwordless experience to Citrix, but you still have that fundamental password to begin with. So Saml is a compelling option. Saml is the option that TruU ended up using. But what we'd like to show you is the nuances of how we generate that Saml assertion without the use of a password. Now, some other considerations were we certainly wanted to leverage or maximize the existing Citrix capabilities. We didn't want customers to have to submit lots of RFEs to Citrix for custom capabilities or use other third-party software. We really wanted to leverage the rich capabilities of the Citrix stack. Given that we use the Saml approach, we also wanted to leverage the existing identity management deployments that our customers have already invested in and customers are already familiar using. And finally, it has to be a scalable solution. It means that from all the use cases above, logins from corporate workstations, logins from kiosk devices, personal computers, etc., it has to be a true passwordless solution through and through, and it also has to be a very reliable solution through and through. So taking these as our design goals and some of the constraints, I'd like to show you how our integration works with a couple of demo videos. All right. So first and foremost, I want to see if everyone can see the video.
Jason, we are seeing the Mac, but we're not hearing you at the moment.
Got it, makes sense. So in this first video, what I'd like to show you is the use case of how TruU enables login, particularly for machines that are off the network, potentially our shared devices like kiosk devices, as well as those personal workstations. And what you're going to see as a demo is we first provide a QR scan capability as well as a mobile push capability. And what I'll do is I'll play each of those portions and I'll talk through what you are seeing as far as the user experience goes. Great. So in this first demo, what you saw was a user from any of these types of computers are logging into their Citrix instance from a browser. They're immediately presented with a QR code for which they can scan with the TruU mobile app. Upon that scan, the person provided their biometrics, which was the native Face ID or Touch ID of the mobile phone. And that was all that was required to log in, not just to the Citrix portal or Citrix Storefront or Citrix Workspace, but to, as an example, a workstation, as you see here. It's a very frictionless experience. It's also a passwordless experience. Now, the next use case I'd like to show is how we can also enable a more frictionless experience where the user doesn't have to scan a code, but instead they can respond to a mobile push notification. All right, so as you see here, one of the experiences that you can also configure with TruU is the ability to set a non-authenticating crypto cookie in the browser, in the user's browser. And after that initial QR scan, that non-authenticating crypto cookie can be utilized to trigger that push notification that you saw. And as a very similar experience, the user responds to that push notification. They provide the biometrics through their phone, and they're seamlessly authenticated to the Citrix portal, as well as to the resources that are available to them within the Citrix portal. It's a very seamless experience. It's not rooted with a password anywhere, and it also provides very seamless experience for the end user overall. I'm going to show you one more video. Now, to set the stage for this video, the next use case I'd like to show is more of what the typical employee at the office would get as a user experience as it relates to TruU. As we had talked about, a true passwordless solution does not mean passwordless to an application. It really means the foundational authentication is without a password. There's no root password utilized anywhere in the authentication process. And so what you're going to see here is I'm logging in to my workstation. It's a passwordless login experience. And what we're going to show you here is the most seamless password experience that TruU can offer. That passwordless experience to the computer can then generate a Kerberos ticket. Many organizations today utilize that Kerberos ticket with their identity provider to provide a passwordless experience to Citrix. And it's just another mechanism for, as an example, simplifying that QR scan or that mobile push that you saw. But really the key that I'm going to show you here is a passwordless login experience to the workstation. From the workstation, given that it's an on-network machine, I've generated a Kerberos ticket that's been passed to my identity provider. The identity provider authenticated me with that ticket and was able to pass it over to Citrix for verifying my identity. I'll go ahead and play that experience so you can see how that looks like. Very seamless, all without the use of a password. Okay, so what you just saw was I was able to unlock my computer with proximity of phone to my laptop only. Now, this is the best user experience that TruU can offer, but we can also leverage the proximity element and require things like a biometric verification on the phone or a PIN as other alternative workstation login mechanisms. Once I was in the machine, Kerberos ticket was generated behind the scenes. I was able to leverage that Kerberos ticket for seamless login into Citrix and into specifically a Citrix workstation. All of this was generated without the use of a password. All of it was very secure. It utilized elements of biometrics along the process. And we think that this is a very frictionless user experience that end users who have used the TruU offering really enjoy. So I'll go ahead and play just another angle of this so you can see that what the experience with proximity of phone to workstation looks like, and we can talk a little bit more from there. Great. So hopefully, as you saw there, we were able to provide true passwordless from the workstation level and all the way up to Citrix. It's a very seamless user experience as well, and leverages biometric technologies versus the more traditional passwordless technologies that many of our customers are trying to remove today. So what I'd like to move into next is how this works. So from an architectural perspective, everything to the bottom right and in green represents a typical Citrix deployment, a deployment that you may already have. Given that we're using the Saml integration approach, the two items in blue, the identity provider towards the left, and then the Citrix FAS component sitting right above Citrix Storefront, may be net new components that you need to deploy. The purpose of Citrix FAS specifically is when you use the Saml authentication approach, you cannot get into an operating system with a Saml assertion. And that's where Citrix came out with its Federation Authentication Service plugin, where that Saml assertion can generate a certificate. That certificate is used for certificate-based access to operating systems specifically, so that virtual desktop that you saw me access earlier. Now, on the left side, the items in orange, these are the TruU components. So from the TruU perspective, we first have an integration with your identity provider. That integration allows the identity provider to delegate its authentication request to TruU. This is what allows TruU to validate the user without the use of a password, as you saw initially in the QR scan flow. We also have agents and a mobile app that exists towards the bottom left of the screen. The mobile app was used to scan the QR code. We call that an anonymous authentication flow. And really, at the end of the day, it's validating the user's identity on behalf of the identity provider that you see in blue. Once the identity provider has gotten confirmation of the user's identity, then they generate that Saml assertion and pass it over to Citrix for that authentication process. Now, when it came to the second demo video that I showed you, how I was able to log into my machine and how that generated the Kerberos ticket and how that Kerberos ticket was leveraged for a passwordless authentication experience. Well, the desktop agent communicates via Bluetooth proximity to the user's mobile device. And there's different ways you can configure. In the video, you saw that proximity of my phone to the laptop only was enough to log me into my desktop. Because my desktop was connected to the network, I was able to get that Kerberos ticket on the back end, and that Kerberos ticket was able to give me a passwordless experience into Citrix. Other experiences that we can provide additional security, where on the mobile app side, the user can be prompted for biometrics, or in similar scenarios with smart cards, you can be asked for a PIN as well. All of these mechanisms are the ways TruU provides passwordless access to Citrix across all the use cases that we talked about. And we think it's a very compelling solution as customers ask and are curious about true passwordless technologies for Citrix and other resources within their organization. So to summarize, echoing back on what Horacio was mentioning, passwordless is now becoming a common term. I think it's very important to understand, does that solution truly address passwordless through and through? As you can see with TruU and Citrix, we can enable use cases such as access from computers that are not connected to the network. We can provide access to kiosk devices, access to Citrix from personal workstations. That's primarily done via the QR scan and the mobile push flows that you saw in the first video. When it comes to accessing the workstation, which may be used to generate things like Kerberos tickets, we leverage the element of phone in proximity to the laptop, and we can elevate that experience with also the use of a PIN or the verification of the user via Face ID or Touch ID. So with that said, I'll pass it back to Horacio.
Thanks, Jason. Let me wrap it up here because we want to leave some time for questions, but we've only focused here on the aspects of our solution that come into Citrix. Obviously, the deep integration that Jason just very clearly described. One of the things that he showed was the proximity. This is really a unique differentiator for TruU and really sets us apart in the market. This ability to use the Bluetooth connectivity for offline and even radio approximation. We can approximate how far you are. It's a huge feature for us, and I think something that really breaks that barrier that we talked about on the next level user experience. We didn't talk too much about the FIDO support, but we are FIDO certified in the sense that our architecture is based on public key cryptography, so the private keys are stored locally on the phone. There is no shared secret central database to hack. You can really eliminate the risk of a password data breach using a solution like this. And while we talk a lot about passwordless, really it depends on where your organization is at in the journey. It doesn't mean that day one you need to not have a password in the directory, but it will allow your users not to have to remember one. So the password could exist. It could be your fail-safe, or perhaps in some very niche use case you want it to be there. But it really allows an organization to have a journey to where they're really not using passwords in the future. So we don't necessarily mandate that a company eliminate the password day one, but for sure the end user doesn't have to remember it, and that already cuts your surface area of attack much lower. And we haven't talked about full cycle, life cycle aspects of the product, but when you have a solution like this, it's very important that if you're going to be enabling people through a mobile device to get access to your resources, that you make sure that that person is who they say they are. So attestation of the individual is very important from the onboarding process. And then if they switch out their phone and they want to recover their ability to get into a building or into a system, you have to make sure that the attestation is there for self-service account recovery. And certainly in a COVID world that we live in today, self-service is important. So all of these aspects should be part of your thinking if you're looking at implementing Citrix and possibly broader scale passwordless. And so we'll leave it at that, and I'll turn it back over to Anil and any Q&A.
Right, thanks Horacio and Jason. I think the demo videos were pretty awesome. Love to have something like that implemented personally for my access, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the customers out there would love to implement, and I'm sure they have a few questions. So let me take a couple of them which have come through. I think this is something very important because since there's no one-time code or anything involved, and everything mostly happens over the mobile phone and the proximity. I think one of the users have asked, how do you address some of the interruptions like lack of internet connectivity and things like that?
Yeah, I could take that one. So lack of internet connectivity to me really tells me more that the user's trying to log into their workstation without an internet connection. And one of the things that we had talked about was our capability around Bluetooth and how we can utilize Bluetooth in the context of phone in proximity to laptop for login. This technology, of course, enables that offline experience that Horacio had mentioned. And so Solution today, both online, offline specifically utilizing our proximity capabilities.
Yeah, I would second that offline, the ability to use your laptop on a plane when you're not connected or on any use case like that is vital. And so we had to solve that problem first. And that is one of the benefits you would get with, you want to make sure that any vendor you're looking at in the space has the ability to very robust Bluetooth support. We've been particularly working with the source vendors of Bluetooth directly to make the technology super robust and super reliable because it's mission critical in those situations.
Right, that's perfect. Thank you. And Jason, you showed the architecture diagram and how TruU kind of integrates with the IDP providers. Do you know who are the IDPs that you partnered with or you support?
Yeah, we generally support most of the major identity providers out there. So for example, Okta, Ping, Microsoft, ForgeRock. These are common integrations that we've already worked with customers already. And generally with most IDPs out there, there is extensibility, whether it's via a OpenID connection with the identity provider or a set of plugins that third parties can develop with them in order for TruU to ultimately integrate with those identity providers out there. So the answer is it varies, but there are mechanisms. It just depends on what type of identity provider that we are trying to integrate with.
Right, that's perfect. I think we have time for just 2 more questions. So let me quickly go through it. So how do you unlock, I mean, the use cases where the virtual desktops gets locked? How do we unlock it using TruU?
Yeah, there's a couple of scenarios. In one of the scenarios, you can certainly scan a QR code. So that enables the user to unlock with TruU in a very similar experience as you saw me scanning a QR code for logging into the Citrix portal. There's another mechanism which does not necessarily unlock the machine. Citrix has a capability where if you lock the machine, you can also close the user's browser, and thus they will never be presented with that native window screen where you would typically see a password. So there's 2 approaches. One is the QR scan with TruU to unlock. The other is utilizing an existing Citrix capability where if the user does lock their computer, it can effectively close the session and the user will be required to relaunch that virtual desktop instance in order to resume a particular session.
Perfect. And then one last question. How do you manage flexibility where a user loses his phone?
Go ahead, Jason, on that one.
Yeah, so we do today leverage the mobile device as your primary authentication mechanism. And as Horacio had mentioned, if you lose that phone, there are other capabilities built into our product where either the user re-enrolls through a strong enrollment process, or we also support third-party FIDO keys. So you can leverage existing FIDO keys with TruU as your alternative login mechanism, specifically if you've lost your phone and need another mechanism, strong authenticating mechanism, to get into your Citrix resources.
Right, I think that's perfect. Sure, go ahead, Horacio.
Yeah, I was going to say that this is really important. The way we're designing, we have designed this for self-service, right? Because in today's environment, it's not always the case that you as an employee can go in physically to your help desk and to get help, to get your access reissued to you. And so what Jason just described around strong authentication, some very neat technology we have there that when you are first onboarded, we can, through some advanced biometrics and other things that we're working on, make sure that it's you, very high levels of identity verification. And then when you need, if you need to get back account recovery, that you can do it by yourself without assistance in a very high assurance way. And so that's the design goal we've had there, and we already are enabling this advanced strong authentication in these aspects today. So.
Right. Thanks, Horatio, for that. And Jason, if you could go one slide before this, please. Just wanted to remind the attendees of the gift which we had put out earlier. So every 10th attendee on this webinar will be notified through an email. Just fill out the instructions and send it back to us, and that particular earpods could be yours. And with that said, we've come to the conclusion of this webinar. Horatio, Jason, I think both the demo and the presentation went really great. I'm pretty sure a lot of our attendees really loved it. We'll still have a lot of questions coming in, but we'll definitely reach out to you over the email to address those questions. Obviously, the webinar is being recorded and we'll be posting it on our YouTube channel and sharing the links. And yeah, once again, thanks everyone for joining in today's webinar. Have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.